Hey fellas, so before we begin the video, I'd like to quickly state that I am not advocating or encouraging the harassment, doxing, targeting, bullying of any individuals that might be mentioned or featured in this particular video. Remember, this is an opinion piece of my particular commentary on the subject matter that we will be discussing today, however controversial as it may be. So, with that all stated, let's go ahead and continue the video. Oh hey, what's going on everybody? TujoPanda back in action to talk about something else. Today by something else, we're going to be returning to a previously discussed topic. Yep, Thanksgiving's come and gone. We're already got Christmas on the way. By the way, I sincerely hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with family and friends. But perhaps there was a possibility that you had to enjoy Thanksgiving on your own. You know, hopefully you cooked something nice for yourself. You can reflect upon times long past and a nice Thanksgiving dinner right in front of you to enjoy. But if you didn't, hey, I wish you all the best. Honestly, Christmas is only a couple of weeks away, so why don't you consider contacting family and friends and having that Thanksgiving dinner that you know you deserve. But yeah, you actually caught me while I was about to dig in, but I suppose I can pull away for a couple minutes and talk to you all about something. So, I have talked about this subject matter before already, to great length in fact. Like, you know pretty much everything that I know, because I can't really keep much to myself unless I have to, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception. You all remember Hypnotist Sappho, right? Well, she's certainly been making her rounds. I mean, she's been creating a lot of waves with the fucking zoophile North America bullshit that she's trying to espouse, and a lot of her activities that have been taking place online have become public knowledge. As in, you know a lot, I know a lot of people on Twitter know a lot. Because Twitter is, as much as it's sort of an open sewer right now of hate and toxicity, but at the same time, there is some valuable information to glean from that particular platform. It's why I'm still there. But at the same time, I acknowledge it for what it is an open forum by which people can express themselves or share information or, cheer each other up through wonderful heartfelt memes or images or wishes of good fortune upon you and I. But for some people, it's also a conduit by which hate can be directed at certain people. While I generally speak against cancel culture, I do acknowledge it as having a place in today's social media-driven world. And especially for people like Hypnotist Sappho, who have been engaging in insidious behavior, and in fact they themselves stand for something that's truly abhorrent, I can't really feel too bad for all the castigation that she's gotten. I don't endorse it, I don't encourage it, but at the same time, it's hard for me to feel bad about somebody that's an openly admitted zoophile. And not even because this was a moment of clarity where it's like, hey, I just want to get this off my chest and share it with you all, that you all have a right to know this, and I want to tell you all. Like she said that she fucking shared with her family and friends. Give me a fucking break. I highly doubt any of her family and friends were okay with it. She's probably got the horse blinders on and are just kind of like, oh, well, they're just bigoted. I'm right, you're wrong, and that's just how it is. And some people on my YouTube channel, they had left comments on the last video I made about the subject, basically stating that Hypnotist Sappho is the troll type that likes to piss a lot of people off and suck up all that animosity like it's a drug. It gets her high, gets that dopamine flowing, you know what I mean? And some trolls operate that way. Like, we're feeding into that, but at the same time, I don't really see anything objectionable to voicing your concerns about having an openly admitted zoophile that's actively grooming children in the community. I don't think that's a far cry from what would be a sane response, don't you think? So why am I talking about her again? I thought I talked about it to great length over the course of 2 videos. Well, Kaya Wu, if you're watching this right now, here's looking at you, kid. Kaya Wu basically tipped me off about a new development. It's been less than 24 hours since that happened, and it's important to bear in mind that, the dust is still settling. It hasn't settled completely because the people on Twitter are still talking about it. But as of the recording of this video, there's been a newfound development. Alright, so Hypnotist Sappho, she's had a bit of a history of grooming minors. I expressed doubt that she was a bona fide pedophile, but she certainly displays pedophilic tendencies insofar as having this gross apathy towards the age of consent. She's of the belief that age is just a number and that anybody can consent at any time and that children are just like you or I, that they can consent just as much as you or I can. And to that, I have to say that is the least bit horrifying of a thought, that she would just have that mindset. You know, that's incredibly disruptive and, like, destructive for a young mind. Like, being introduced to sex at that early of an age. Granted, I guess you could, like, point out that America isn't exactly the best place for kids. Like, over-sexualization of the culture has certainly created sort of an offshoot where kids are, you know, sexualizing early. But that's a topic of discussion for another video. It doesn't excuse her, like, activities, is what I'm trying to say. Hell, the whole narrative behind this is that back in the day, Hypnotist Sappho, when she first got to VRChat, she would sort of prowl lobbies and try to pick out the people that were socially awkward, meek, or vulnerable to her advances. And she had sort of this dommy-mommy persona, where it was kind of a sexualized sort of way. She would start love-bombing people and trying to, you know, basically get them to really like her so that she could manipulate them and she could attain a following. And over a relatively short span of time, after offering various hypnotherapy sessions, she would whisk them away into private worlds, and the magic would truly happen. Did I say magic? I meant cringe. The corruption could happen. Because she certainly is a corrupting influence. I mean, setting up that Zoophile North America organization. If, like, combine that with the fact that she's actively grooming children, she seems to be setting up the conditions by which she can groom the next generation of zoophiles. That's how this is all playing out for me. That is the grand revelation here. But it gets a little bit worse than that. Because there are, like, various minors out there, the youngest of which has to be 13 years old. They made a tweet where they're just saying, like, hey, like, you leave Sappho alone. They're actually nice to me. I like Sappho. Nothing that you haters can say can, you know, turn me away. And I love her like my mama because my actual mama doesn't give a shit about me. And it's really in those kinds of situations that you sort of look at that and all you can really do is slowly shake your head and just kind of be like, yo. Like, you can't really attack the kid. The kid doesn't know any better. Like, it's really the person that you should be attacking is Sappho, because it's like, come on. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew how old they were, number two. And you're not helping their situation by exploiting their vulnerability, by having a new follower, a new, like, white knight for you to just parade around and use and abuse as you so wish. Because I feel like she does. If it's, like, below the age of 18, like, she is actively abusing these kids. She's filling their minds with very harmful ideas. And they're going to grow up with this misunderstanding, this desync with what is normal. And it's going to be bad, okay? Like, we don't need another generation of zoophiles. We don't need 10 more Kiro the Wolves running around cropping up in the near future, okay? Heaven fucking forbid, but it could happen with all of this going on. And I'm not trying to pull a slippery slope fallacy. Like, the proof is in the pudding. You see these kids that think that what Sappho is doing is perfectly okay and are willing to defend her name because a couple of quote-unquote bullies and haters online are shitting on her right now. This isn't just some sort of online bully parade. This is something serious, okay? I cannot impress upon you even more than I am now. But there's something that Kaya Wu had referenced in his comment in the video. He had tipped me off on a new development, which prompted me to conduct my own research, or at least try to. I scoured Twitter for everything I could find. I basically jumped headfirst, and I was looking at her Twitter profile. Also, I just want to say, like, Hypnotist Sappho tweets a fucking lot. I was scrolling through paragraphs upon paragraphs of Twitter messages, and unless she's like a speed demon when it comes to typing, like Sonic the Hedgehog or the Flash, like, that takes a lot of time, okay? Like, a fair amount of time if you're tweeting that much per day. Which begs the question, how much fucking time does she have on her hands? How is she going to run her Zoophile North America bullshit, or Zeta North America bullshit, if, like, she's tweeting on Twitter all day? I don't know. But anyway, something had happened with one of the people that were closest to Hypnotist Sappho, alright? Here's the narrative. The narrative goes that one of the close friends of Hypnotist Sappho, who happened to be an underage minor, their parents, namely their mother, had found out about the fact that they were a zoophile, what they were posting online, what they were doing, and after receiving a harsh, stern talking to, they decided to take their own life. Their name was Julia Carlson, which sounds just generic enough that it's ambiguous on whether the story is even real, or whether Julia Carlson as a person is even real, and whether anything that's happened surrounding this alleged person had even happened. Because allegedly, what happened after the fact is that Julia Carlson, they had received this harsh condemnation from their parents, and life was flashing before their eyes. Their internet privileges were probably taken away, that they would never have the opportunity to speak to Hypnotist Sappho again, the one, the true, the only, at least in their mind, for them to have solace or mental solitude, to be able to confide in another human being that was willing to hear them out, take them in when nobody else would, and could truly understand them, or so they thought. And they decided to take their own life because they couldn't see an out. They couldn't see this playing out any other way than absolute misery from that point onwards. That is the story. And there's plenty of people that just took that story and ran with it. They ran with it like they were the fucking quarterback, trying to score a touchdown. And it wasn't just Hypnotist Sappho and her goons. It was also the people that were detracting from her. That the people that were against Hypnotist Sappho blamed Hypnotist Sappho for the kid's death. That if Hypnotist Sappho hadn't filled their mind with all of these crazy bullshit ideals, then that kid would have been completely normal, wouldn't have been found out by their parents, and wouldn't have committed suicide because they wouldn't have had the stress suddenly forced down on them by their parents and having to face the possibility of never having a normal life. The normal life in their mind being one where they could talk to Sappho and remain in active communication with her. And Hypnotist Sappho, she has this sort of way of manipulating people. She tries to get in your good graces by love bombing you, by putting you up on the pedestal. Shit that a narcissist would do. Look it up. Go ahead, do your research. I don't need to tell you about that. I will certainly be covering the topic of love in the future, and the closet narcissist and the narcissist are two people that you need to stay away from when you're trying to pursue romance, but we're not quite there yet. I'll have to do that another time. For right now, I will just say that Hypnotist Sappho is displaying a lot of sociopathic and, honestly, narcissistic tendencies in how she conducts herself. And the least of which is the manipulative way that she conducts herself with other people. And somebody had quickly pointed out that they did a comparison of Hypnotist Sappho's VR chat profiles. You can make a VR chat profile now. As in you can convey to other people what you're all about here on VR chat, which is a good way to get to know somebody from the get-go, but usually it's filled with cringy memes, so you can't really get a whole lot from that. So you really have to just talk to somebody. But if somebody had no idea who you were, they never heard you speak, they just clicked on your name and decided to say, who's this guy all about? What's this guy all about? Hypnotist Sappho, don't quote me on this because this is completely by memory. They claim to be studying under the Neo-Erickson sort of methodology of hypnotherapy. And, it wasn't until more recently that they referenced that they are studying at the Mike Handel, I want to say university, but I know it's not a university, Mike Handel Academy, I believe, in Toronto, to become, a hypnotherapist. It clashes a little bit with what I learned from the Coyote Lovely interview, where Coyote Lovely had actually interviewed Hypnotist Sappho. And Hypnotist Sappho used a lot of references to big names to try to legitimize their craft, as it were. That they are hypnotherapists, that they're bona fide, they're studying to become a bona fide hypnotherapist. Now, hypnosis on its own, you're basically considered a street performer, a magician, somebody that would get on stage and, be able to hypnotize people and would be played off as a trick. Therapy is a little bit different, especially hypnotherapy. So hypnosis on its own, you can practice that without a license or a college degree or anything like that. But for actual hypnotherapy, focusing on the therapy part, that requires a lot more I guess, credentials to be able to do legally and to make the claim that you're doing it legally. All right. As far as what Hypnotist Sappho does, a lot of her, you want to call them lectures, or do you want to call them, like workshops, where she would have a bunch of people there and use calm, soothing words to sort of like lull them into a sense of security, a stable place. I do not admonish her necessarily for that on its own, but when it's sexualized and people are being taken for a ride and they could potentially be underage minors, that's what I take an issue with. I've known some hypnotists here on VR Chat, and they're all usually wonderful people, if a little bit out there due to their proclivities. I have never sat through a session myself, but I've seen it happen before me, like in minute form. It's interesting, it's fascinating, but it's not for me, all right? But in Hypnotist Sappho's case, there's the least bit of like some cynicism and skepticism about her qualifications. And some people have gone so far as to say that she's just studying what's available online. Kind of like when you go to Udemy, if you get the $10 course, you have access to some pre-recorded lectures and materials for you to do self-learning through. It's actually a very good wealth of information. The problem with that is it's not for everybody. Sometimes you need actual instruction, like somebody to hold your hand and guide you through on how to actually do something. For hypnotherapy, it's a little bit more ambiguous for me because, that requires a lot of people. People are very diverse as far as your emotions, your personality, your triggers, as it were, things that might trigger a traumatic episode in your mind, depending on what you've been through. Things that, require a lot of tender, loving care and understanding and comprehension in order to read somebody to more accurately be able to help them. The human mind is not completely understood. I mean, we've been studying it for, thousands of years, but it wasn't until the exploits of Sigmund Freud and various people that came after him that psychology as a science was respected and, that the understanding of the human mind could really expand. I'm not entirely sure if Hypnotist Sappho is helping the people that she claims to be, helping. She certainly has manipulated them and gaslighted them and love bombed them to the point that they have, become her defenders, as it were, in the face of controversy. But there have been plenty of people that have been burned by her to the point that they're willing to shed light on the activities and policies of her Discord server, which, as I mentioned in my last video, had a lot of minors. The most egregious of being was a 13-year-old minor that was a moderator, inexplicably, had access to NSFW content. A lot of minors did, but she tried to get rid of them all after they made her look bad. She didn't need a whole lot of attention levied upon her as she was trying to build her grand plan, Zeta North America. As far as Julia goes, I don't know one way or the other if she's actually even real. I don't know if a suicide has actually happened. People very quickly pointed out that there was no obituary statement. There was no news statement mentioning this. There was no mention of Julia Carlson. In fact, if you look at Julia Carlson, the only evidence that a Julia Carlson may have existed was a Telegram screen cap that Hypnotist Sappho gushed over, laid a half-assed eulogy for, apologized for not being there to help her when she needed her the most, and wished her the best. Best wishes in the afterlife. Rest in peace. You deserve it. And the worst thing about it is Hypnotist Sappho took that alleged suicide, plopped it down, got up on top of it like it was her soapbox, and decided to preach to the rest of us about how horrible us antis were, that we are the ones that caused this suicide. And that she was going on and on about how, you antis always say that the only good zoophile is a dead zoophile and are constantly telling us to kill ourselves. Well, look what happened. You all should feel absolutely fucking terrible. And it's okay, even if a suicide legitimately happened, the fact that you're using this to bolster your cause is the least bit disgusting for me. All right? To the point that I would actively spit on your grave if you happen to die. Number two, Like, okay, so you're going to take this suicide even though it's not verified. If Hypnotist Sappho knows and like has some information that was going to like actually legitimize the claim of suicide, I'll eat my hat. I'll eat this gold ring back here that I stole from Sonic the Hedgehog. Nah, I'm not going to do that. But I will say I'll lend more credence if I actually have evidence to pour over. But the fact that she's going to do this, even if Julia Carlson had died, even if the suicide had happened, the fact that she's going to use this as a political platform to espouse her own bullshit to the rest of us is the least bit disgusting, don't you think? Like, what the fuck? That's like your best friend dying, like, to a gun or something like that, and you get up on your friend's death and says, this is why we need gun control. Now, if you're just saying that after the fact, like, I would completely understand. I wouldn't, like, castigate you for it. But if you went above and beyond, like, completely forgetting about your friend dying and transition your shift of focus entirely on gun control, like, that's where I would just be like, okay, what about your friend dying? Shouldn't we be going after the murderer who killed them? Like, you know, I'm just citing a bullshit, like, you know, example off the top of my head. But, like, when you have to, like, use that as a basis for your own cause, like, that's when it gets disgusting for me, all right? I don't know. It's like, whether Julia Carlson exists or not, I have no idea. I'm going to go ahead and say it's a 50-50, okay? I don't personally believe Julia Carlson is a real person. If you're going to show me one Telegram screen cap, no Twitter mentions, no VR chat like profile, no presence online that has been around for a couple of years to justify like that they are a bona fide person. And I say for a couple of years because like it would be very suspicious if this Julia Carlson was only here with us for like 2 weeks and then mysteriously went silent after that after the suicide happened. It would play off to me as a burner account that somebody had adopted the persona of this dead girl and was pretending like they had died and that all this has happened, the narrative as I stated, and like was trying to use this as justification for shutting us antis, as Zaphos likes to call us. Then yeah, like I don't know. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that it's inconclusive. There is no proof in the pudding as to whether Julia Carlson is actually a real person or if a suicide had actually occurred. Only a couple of people mention it, only a couple of people on both sides of the equation, whether they're defenders of Sappho or detractors of Sappho, have even mentioned the suicide. The detractors obviously blamed, Sappho for the suicide. The defenders blamed the antis and people against zoophilia for the suicide. But even if it actually happened, the fact that, the people don't accept the gravity of the situation, that they had died not because their parents killed them, but because their parents had spoken to them a little bit sternly about their desires. Obviously, if you're a parent, if you're a mother or father, and you find out that your child is a zoophile, that they want to have sex with animals, you're probably going to have a mute moment of horror, abject horror. Then you're going to have anger, okay? You're going to yell at the child. You're going to, express to them why this is wrong and, probably lose your cool. I don't think the child was hit. I would certainly hope not in this alleged, hypothetical situation, because it certainly doesn't speak to me as real. But yeah, I could be entirely wrong about this, by the way. The suicide may have happened. It just wasn't mentioned because, minors, the suicide of minors has increased in recent years, it seems like, anecdotally to me, which is brought on by the stress-driven society in which we live. But at the same time, I think at a certain age, what happens is, news organizations aren't going to make your name publicly known, out of respect for the family. It really depends on the circumstances and situation. They're going to keep you anonymous in certain situations. But, in this case, there's no mention, hide, nor hair. If you look up the name Julia Carlson on Google, you'll find plenty of Julia Carlsons out there. However, all the Julia Carlsons I've seen are pushing 91, 92, maybe a little younger, maybe a little bit older. But they're people that have, quite honestly, transpassed the age that you're expecting a minor to be at, which is about 17, 16, 15, maybe even 14 or 13. because it's not unheard of for people about that age to have hummused with Sappho. Anyway, one other thing that I'd like to mention. As far as more recent things, Hypnotist Sappho, the cracks are beginning to show. Remember when her first video, when she came out, and she was calm, collected? Honestly, her voice kind of pissed me off because I'm just like, can you speak a little faster? Like, she sounds so slow. It's like, hey. Like, imagine if I did my videos like this. Hey, guys. Today, we're going to be talking about Hypnotist Sappho. You probably wouldn't like me as much. It'd be fucking annoying. Like, I wouldn't fucking like me anymore. Like, you know, it's just, like, so slow. It's like, can you speak a little bit faster? But as far as her Twitter activity goes, she just seems to be spending her days spurging out at various people that argue with her about the validity of zoophilia. Or I should say, the invalidity of zoophilia, because animals can't consent. But, you know, Hypnotist Sappho is too thick-headed to understand that. And honestly, it just speaks to me that she doesn't care about, like, keeping this civil, that she'd rather rage at the rest of us. And she's even made a couple of, statements where she's not going to let down and she's not going to back down from the fight. She's going to keep this up with every fucking fiber of her being, and that we need to learn to accept her, which isn't going to fucking happen. Hell, she even made a hot take. A couple hot takes. Like, this is like an entire bag of Cheetos hot fries, okay? Like, how many hot takes I've seen. Like this stellar example. So take comfort in the fact that in 50 years from now, we are going to be seen as bad as the KKK. Which is bullshit, because I'm pretty sure that people of color in the United States, at least before the 1980s, you know, have faced it a lot worse than zoophiles. The fact that people like Hypnotist Sappho can come out and say that they're a self-admitted zoophile and not be, like, beaten up, lynched, or attacked in any way, except online, tells me that she lives in a democratic free society. And, like, you know, it's kind of like Peter Griffin saying this. In fact, a lot of people have said this statement. I absolutely, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. I despise what you happen to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Yeah, like, I'm glad that she came out and, like, was public about all this, her behavior, like, notwithstanding. It tells me to get the fuck away from her. But yeah, like, fucking A. Is she, like, blind to history? The fact that, like, slavery has been an institution here in America all the way up until 1864, and even after slavery was abolished, that African Americans and other minorities had to suffer under truly egregious conditions in everyday society. It got even worse under Lyndon B. Johnson when, like, you know, he started a mess of problems. I'm not going to get into it right now, but, like, you know, it got worse, like, later, and it's only until, like, the modern day, like, even in the 90s, blatant racism was pretty apparent in a lot of forms of media. It wasn't until the 2000s leading into the 2010s and now the 2020s that things have started to get better. But, like, god damn, like, conflating us with the KKK, I don't know, like, the fact that I'm leveling all of this animosity and condemnation towards you, for the fact that you're abusing animals and grooming children, that makes me as bad as the KKK. Okay, Sappho, whatever you say. Speaking of the KKK, like, can we take a minute to talk about the KKK? Like, if these white supremacists, like, the KKK obviously has been a domestic terrorist organization established in the 1860s after the Civil War, and butthurt, like, Confederate soldiers decided to get together and start a frat party. Except the frat party involved lynching people, so that's not really good. But they would attack Confederate, like, Union soldiers and people of color. They were basically a force to be reckoned with until, I want to say, the 1920s is their second reiteration, and then they were sort of on the decline because a lot of people kind of just, they weren't really popular. Now, circa today, like, I think there's only like 1,000 so members of the KKK. What I'm trying to say is, if the KKK wants to espouse that they're like the white supremacists, that they are supreme, and that they are like people that have like superiority over the rest of us. I happen to be a minority, by the way. Then don't you think that more of its members would be, I don't know, like scientists, doctors, lawyers, people of like good intelligence and IQ and skill sets, instead of being a handful of blue collars that are butthurt that their jobs got outsourced? Still bullshit that their jobs got outsourced, but again, they have other options in which they can take to improve their own livelihood instead of blaming somebody else's mere existence for their own shortcomings. That's just how I see it. Because I remember there being a documentary about the KKK where, like, you'd have these people that worked at, like, I don't know, Home Depot or, like, very blue-collar sort of work life. And it was a very simplified outlook that they had on life and why their way of life was the right way and that, like, everyone else is wrong. Which I obviously have some very strong opinions about in contrast to them, but yeah, it's just weird. But yeah, the fact that, like, comparing us to the KKK just because we have the sanity and rationale to understand that what zoophiles are doing is the least bit destructive to the minds of animals, the minds and bodies in the abuse to animals, as well as the kids. Also, like, by that same token, Hypnotist Sappho herself doesn't seem to lend credence to the idea of, consent laws. She doesn't seem to, like, understand the age of consent. That children... She's made several statements about it, is what I'm trying to say. Either in privacy or in public. That age is just a number, that kids can consent, that if they have the cognizance and ability to hold a conversation, they can understand and comprehend what consent means. Which is the least bit troubling for somebody like me, but, is it really that surprising to hear it from Hypnotist Sappho? Not really. And especially given the fact of how many people were actively in her Discord server with wanton access to NSFW content that should be reserved for anybody over the age or at the age of 18. But I digress. And, like, a number of people have spoken on the subject. A lot of attention has been levied on Hypnotist Sappho. And, just a cursory glance at my YouTube channel the other day, I was kind of surprised that the two biggest topics of interest that I'd covered here, like, at least more recently, was Garo Shadow Scale and Hypnotist Sappho. Hypnotist Sappho very quickly has been catching up to the whole Garo Shadow Scale, like, video that I made at over 7,000 views. Like, give me a fucking break. The fact that she's going to continue to, like, argue this out and fight to the very core of her being shows me that she is very deluded. Granted, there were some people that commented on my YouTube channel, I'll probably bring them up when we look at some material, you and I, because it's not just going to be like us sitting at the table, talking about whatever daily events happen to be going on. I actually collected some material off Twitter. A lot of fan art, too. A lot of people were very quick to draw some fan art of Sappho. When I say fan art, I don't mean it like they were trying to support her in any way, so you can all breathe a sigh of relief right now. What I'm trying to say is the fan art was of them usually murdering her persona in very vile, despicable ways. I don't encourage such things, but if it's just confined to art, I'm not feeling that strongly about it, Like, I'm not going to tell these people, hey, don't. I'm not entirely sure if I should credit them. I don't want them to be targets towards, like, zoophiles and various other ne'er-do-wells out there that might happen to take notice of their activities and try to report them on Twitter. But I will at least cite their name, or make an attempt to. Other than that, it's a lot of tweets, posts, and various other things that will, get the noggin jogging, maybe make you think about something. Some material that certainly caught my interest is there was somebody that seemed to speak with sort of a educated point of view on, the effect of animals that have been sexually abused, how they behave in front of other people, if they've been conditioned to be sexual objects for people, and what their psychological, behavior seems to tell her about what's been done to them. And, you know, it's sort of like a combination of a physical examination and a mental examination, studying their behavior. Because some animals, they don't take it well, all right? They become very aggressive after they've been effectively raped. They don't like people at that point. They don't like being touched in certain areas. And a lot of, like, shelters out there just put them down, like euthanize them, because they're deemed unadoptable. That the establishment, the shelter that happens to accept this animal, they don't have the facilities necessary to try to rehabilitate them. On top of which, they also don't have the staff or training or personnel that are capable of rehabilitating them, even if they did have the facilities necessary to do so. So, I don't know, like, it comforts me that there's actually scholarly articles, or at least scholarly people that have dealt with this sort of thing and are able to speak on it from a point of view of an academic point of view. But, like, Hypnotist Sappho, remember, she knows best, okay? She's the aspired dog whisperer. She communicates with these animals with her mind. She knows better than the rest of us, right? Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take a break. You all look at that material. I'm going to get to something a little bit more important, like eating my dinner. So, back in a sec. So you all remember the first video that spawned this entire debacle? It was the coming out video, the one where Hypnotist Sappho is adorned in the Wicker Beast avatar, and she basically comes out on camera with her soothing voice. It's just like, hey everyone, I'm Hypnotist Sappho, and I'm a zoophile, announcing to the whole wide world over the World Wide Web that she's a zoophile, and basically filling up the rest of that airtime for 30 minutes, pseudo-intellectual bullshit about why it's a-okay to fuck your dog. I was under the impression that that was her actual persona. Then I happened to take a look at her YouTube channel. I saw the avatar picture that she was using as a very feline-looking anthropomorphic character there. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's her actual persona, and the Wicker Beast is just a character used to add to the appeal, allure, and mystique of her mode of character. But yeah, people in some of the prior YouTube videos I had posted in the comments section were very quick to point out that what had actually happened is that Wicker Beast was her actual avatar. Wasn't her persona, was her avatar, something that she probably commissioned or worked on herself. However, various nefarious parties here on VRChat, finding out about her and deciding that they had enough of her bullshit, had decided to rip the avatar and make it freely available, to the World Wide Web, like anybody and everybody that possibly wanted to look like Hypnotist Sappho could, free of charge. Which I have to say is the least bit of a dick move, but at the same time, considering it happened to Hypnotist Sappho, do I really feel that bad? It's pretty hard to feel bad, like, considering that avatar ripping is a serious offense here in VRChat. But considering it happened to Hypnotist Sappho, and what I know that they're guilty of, I don't know. However, I will say this. would you really want to go parading yourself around looking like a self-admitted dogfucker? Like, anybody that looks at that avatar and has no idea who Sappho is, the history behind that avatar, and like what it's been involved with, imagine their shock when they wake up one day and they find that coming out video. It's already been like a year. The video's already been floating around for a year. They're wondering why people are treating them a little bit weirdly. Man, imagine the shock that you would see on their face. Anyway, a lot of people on social media, namely Twitter, Reddit, and various other places, have sort of pooled their resources together, tried to conduct some investigative journalism, trying to find out who Sappho actually is, as far as their actual name, what they look like, their address, various other tidbits of information. I was privy to seeing what's alleged to be their actual face, because Sappho, in their own defense, tried to put out like the picture of somebody that was completely unrelated to them as their face, as sort of a red herring to throw people off her trail. It didn't work. She's in fact made public statements warning other zoophiles, hey, be very careful about any information, identifying information that can be tied back to you, being publicly available to the World Wide Web. But yeah, considering the fact that like people now know what she looks like and various aspects of her mode of character, her living situation, yeah. By the way, I'm not going to be doxing her. Like, I did see a comment where it's like, hey, dox her. I think doxing is a very serious thing that should not be encouraged. At the same time, I do believe that the people in her state should just be aware of the situation and call the police if there's any hint of any law being broken. The grooming of minors, certainly, but I'm not entirely sure she has access to an animal. Heaven fucking forbid, but if it's a German Shepherd, I would say she's guilty as charged. But anyway, I've seen what's alleged to be her actual name. I've seen what's alleged to be an actual face. And I've seen that she has a partner that's 47 years old that she lives with, and that they're both enlisted in the National Guard, and they're fairly close to a military base. And they've both had a proclivity towards hypnosis, the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy. It's entirely possible, and people are speculating at this point, whether or not that they've been kicked out of the program, possibly due to being reported. It's entirely possible. Or out of sheer embarrassment that it's such a low bar as far as their aspired hypnotherapy, assertions, that they just remove that because technically anybody can do it. You could do it. I could do it. I could sign up for it right now if I wanted to hypnotize people to get their rocks off. It's a possibility. I'm not going to, but it is something within my rights and my capabilities as of right now. It's really a matter of, is it worth the $471 to do it? The whole program all the way to Sappho through. But anyway, no, all that information was sort of parsed. And it paints a sort of clear picture about, I keep wanting to call her by her alleged real name, and I'm trying not to, Hypnotist Sappho. And honestly, Hypnotist Sappho had just come out and said that she was galvanized, that she was empowered by her friend's suicide, that she's going to be attending the funeral. She's still perpetuating the K-fob that she's, actually going to be going above and beyond to attend the funeral, and that she's going to continue to fight the good fight against antis, trolls, and various other haters out there for what she believes is true and honest, and that is that zoophilia is valid. And the internet has responded in a variety of different ways. One comment off the top of my head is yeah, suicide's valid too, which is in the least bit poor taste, but it shows that the emotions right now are still very high, okay? A lot of people are angry about Sappho and are honestly conflating that Sappho, what she's doing, if the suicide is real, she's basically weaponizing a suicide to galvanize her own agenda, and that is to normalize zoophilia. And basically, Hypnotist Sappho turned awful Karen in the comments section. It was just saying, I want you all to take a good, long look at yourself and decide what you did was right or wrong. You caused an innocent minor to commit suicide for something that you started. and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, Karen. I don't know. There's no end in sight about this. I only mention this because it's the latest and greatest, sort of like development that's come in a little bit of a while here, because Zeta North America is slated to go full steam ahead. I really hope it fails in a glorious, artillery bombardment from space, but, it's probably going to exist in some form out there beyond the zoophile communities that have sprung up online. And, anything tied or associated with the Zooier Than Thou podcast, that is the least bit cringeworthy, alright? Like, these are the lowest of the low, rock bottom feeders that I've seen in a long time. And they always have this smug outlook on life that, we're just not enlightened. We just don't know enough. Hell, look at the whole Zooier Than Thou podcast. The Zooier Than Thou podcast basically operated on the pretense that they knew at the back of their minds that animals can consent. I'm more of the agreement to somebody that more recently laid a comment about why are we even saying whether or not animals can or can't consent. Why don't we just, unilaterally accept that sex with animals is not kosher and leave it at that? But no, you have some brainlets out there that want to go above and beyond, like in the poo-poo Olympics, and basically be the absolute shittiest people that you could imagine. And Hypnotist Sappho, her sort of mode of character in the face of all this, any legitimacy that she had in that first video, when she was calm, collected, presented herself in, a very direct manner, went right out the window the minute that she begins to engage in manipulative behavior with anybody that disagrees with her. Anytime that she doesn't get her way, she becomes mean and nasty. I mean, look at the Coyote Lovely interview. If you want to call it an interview, it was completely over Telegram. Thankfully, Shiokami was nice enough to voice the female, in Ms. Sappho, and Coyote Lovely obviously voiced himself, so that's why you had the pretense that there was some sort of dialogue there, but it was all in text. And you get to see how quickly the tune changes when you disagree, even at the most basic level, with her. So, where do we go from here? Well, honestly, the iron's still hot, emotions are still running high. A lot of people are fumigating about all this. And it's enough that I could take screen caps, like dozens upon dozens upon dozens of screen caps of this back and forth between the zoophiles, the ones that honestly are willing to defend, Hypnotist Sappho, and the detractors that are willing to tear her down. Where the truth lies, well, use your fucking brain. I'm just gonna say, like I said before, the suicide probably didn't happen. But if Hypnotist Sappho wants to run with it, be my guest. I just don't see any evidence of Julia Carlson as she's been presented to have actually existed, Maybe she did. It's entirely possible. And a couple of the zoophiles were, leaving spurgy comments about how she's absolutely a real person and that we are just so hateful and bigoted that we can't see the truth, and that we are so callous and uncaring and grossly apathetic to the human suffering of others that we just can't open our eyes and see what the hatred is causing. But I legit don't feel like it happened. So, there we go. Latest and greatest in the absolute worst things could possibly happen, and even if a suicide did happen, the fact that the zoophiles are using it as an air of legitimacy to their cause is the least bit disgusting. But okay, if that's what you want. All right, I'm just gonna shrug my shoulders and watch as this slow moving decline becomes a fast moving decline. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy the video, guys. Till next time, take care and peace. I hope you all have a better one. Hey fellas, thanks for watching the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Would you care to hit that like button and subscribe for more? I greatly appreciate it.